Margaret Wilson gazed at her alarm clock with half-open eyes as it announced 7 in the morning. The winter sunlight streaming through the window of her cozy home in a Philadelphia suburb illuminated a bundle of tickets on her bedside table. A handwritten note read, "Amy's birthday party, Puppet Theater. Just 5 more minutes." David rolled over beside her. Margaret couldn't help but smile. In 12 years of marriage, his morning habits hadn't changed a bit. "No, David. I need to make final arrangements for Amy's birthday party today," Margaret said as she slipped out of bed. "Besides, I have a shift this afternoon." She worked as a hospital nurse. Margaret had been passionate about helping people since childhood and never once regretted choosing this path. Her work was sometimes demanding and occasionally heartbreaking, but whenever she witnessed patients recover, she always felt fulfilled. As she prepared breakfast in the kitchen, she heard small footsteps coming down the stairs. "Good morning, Mom." Amy had just turned 8. Her golden hair was tousled with bedhead, and her blue eyes were still half-closed with sleepiness. "Good morning, happy birthday, my angel," Margaret hugged her daughter. "The real party is tomorrow, Saturday, but Grandma and Grandpa are coming this evening." Amy's face clouded slightly. "Is Grandma coming too?" Margaret felt a pang in her chest. Even Amy could sense her grandmother Ruth's coldness. "Yes, Grandma and Grandpa. And Aunt Vanessa and Zoe will be coming to the party tomorrow." "Zoe's coming. Yay!" Amy suddenly perked up. Margaret's sister Vanessa had divorced 5 years ago and lived with her 7-year-old daughter Zoe. Amy and Zoe were close in age and got along well as cousins. In the afternoon, when Margaret returned from work, her parents' car was already parked in front of the house. As she opened the front door, she heard Harry's warm laughter coming from the living room. "Margaret, welcome home." Harry Foster rose from the sofa to greet his daughter. Deep wrinkles marked his face, but his blue eyes were still full of kindness. "Amy's been telling me all about school."
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit Stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
"Hello, Dad," Margaret embraced her father. Then she nodded to her mother standing behind him. "Mom, thank you for coming." Ruth gave a thin smile. "You're late, Margaret. We've been waiting for 30 minutes. I'm sorry, there was an emergency patient at the hospital." As usual, Ruth cut her off. "I heard from Vanessa that she's getting a promotion next month." "How wonderful. Do you have any plans to become a head nurse?" Margaret took a deep breath. Conversations with her mother were always like this. In Ruth's eyes, Margaret's accomplishments were never enough, while in contrast, her sister Vanessa's achievements were always praiseworthy. "Not at the moment, Mom. I enjoy working directly with patients." "Well, to each their own," Ruth sighed. "Would you make some tea? I'm tired from the long drive." At dinner, Amy sat next to her grandfather Harry, eagerly telling him about events at school. Harry showed genuine interest in his granddaughter's stories, asking questions. Meanwhile, Ruth's attention was mostly directed at her food and occasional messages she checked on her smartphone. "This is from Vanessa," Ruth suddenly announced. "Zoe took first place at her piano recital. That child has talent. Amy won an award at the science fair last week," Margaret said quietly. "Oh, really?" Ruth replied indifferently. "Now, what time should we arrive for the party tomorrow?" That night, after Amy had gone to bed, Margaret and David sat facing each other in the kitchen. "Your mother hasn't changed," David gently took his wife's hand. "No," Margaret sighed. "I thought she might change someday. At least your father truly loves Amy." "Yes, that's a blessing." The next morning, as the house bustled with party preparations, the doorbell rang. Ruth and Harry stood there, holding a large box. "Good morning," Ruth pushed the box into Margaret's hands. "This is something special. My gift for Amy." Inside was an elaborately crafted stuffed animal. At first glance, it was a cute teddy bear, but it had eyes that somehow felt eerie. It was expensive, a limited edition, Ruth said proudly. I found it at an antique shop. I thought about buying one for Zoe too, but there was only one. Margaret handed the teddy bear to Amy. However, her daughter backed away. No, it's scary, Amy said in a trembling voice. Amy. Ruth's voice suddenly turned cold. This is a very valuable present. Show some gratitude. Thank you, but I don't want to touch it, Amy said fearfully. Anger colored Ruth's face. Is this how you've raised her? A child with no sense of gratitude. Mom, she's just a child, Margaret said quietly. She has her preferences. Vanessa's child would have gratefully accepted it, Ruth said sullenly. Margaret didn't argue and placed the teddy bear on a shelf. Amy's eyes remained wide with fear. Margaret gently embraced her daughter's shoulders and whispered in her ear, "It's okay, you don't have to touch it." Across the room, Harry gazed sadly at his wife. His eyes reflected years of weariness and resignation. Sunday, the day after the party, Margaret was finally enjoying a rare day off. As she prepared coffee in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. "Good morning, Maggie," Vanessa cheerfully called as the door opened. Behind her stood Zoe, with her black curls and sparkling eyes. Vanessa always wore perfect makeup and the latest fashions, and today was no exception. "Zoe." Amy raced down the stairs and jumped toward her cousin. The two immediately joined hands and ran up to Amy's room. "How did it go yesterday?" "Mom told me about the party," Vanessa said as she entered the living room. She casually sat on the sofa, crossing her legs. "Well, as expected," Margaret sighed. "Mom gave Amy a teddy bear, but Amy was frightened by it." "Oh dear, that's not good. What did Mom say?" Vanessa's voice conveyed curiosity more than sympathy. "She said Zoe would have accepted it gratefully." Vanessa couldn't help laughing. "I'm sorry, but that's so like Mom." While they were talking, the happy voices of the children could be heard from upstairs. After a while, Zoe and Amy came downstairs. Zoe was firmly holding the teddy bear that Ruth had given Amy. "Auntie, this teddy bear is so cute," Zoe exclaimed with shining eyes. Margaret was surprised for a moment. In contrast to Amy, who had been frightened just yesterday, Zoe seemed to like the teddy bear. "Really? Amy didn't like it. Can I take it home?" Zoe looked up at Margaret with hopeful eyes. Margaret glanced at Amy. Her daughter was clearly showing an expression of relief. "Amy, is that okay?" "Yes. I'll give it to Zoe." Amy answered immediately. "But it was a present from your grandmother," Margaret hesitated a little. "It's fine," Vanessa intervened. "If we don't tell Mom, nobody will know. Besides, if Amy doesn't like it, why shouldn't Zoe have it?" After thinking for a moment, Margaret nodded. "All right. But remember, this was a special present from your grandmother, so take good care of it." "Yay! Thank you," Zoe said in a voice full of joy, hugging the teddy bear tightly. After Vanessa and Zoe left, Margaret observed Amy. She noticed that her daughter's slight fever and runny nose, which had persisted since the previous night, were improving surprisingly quickly. "How are you feeling?" Margaret asked, placing her hand on Amy's forehead. "Really great," Amy replied cheerfully. "I'm not sneezing anymore." Margaret tilted her head slightly. Amy always had allergy symptoms during seasonal changes, but this time she had recovered unusually quickly. "Well, that's good." The next day, when Margaret returned home after her hospital shift, there was a message from Vanessa on the answering machine. "Maggie, Zoe has a slight fever. Could it be that she caught Amy's cold?" Margaret frowned. Amy's allergy symptoms weren't contagious. However, if the children had played together, it was possible that Zoe could have caught a different cold. She called Vanessa back. "Vanessa? How's Zoe?" "She still has a fever." Vanessa's voice was filled with worry. "And strangely, she's starting to develop a rash. She's been sleeping with that teddy bear since she brought it home." Margaret suddenly felt a wave of unease. The timing of Amy's symptoms improving and Zoe falling ill bothered her. "A rash? What does it look like?" "Small red dots, concentrated especially around her arms and neck." From her nursing knowledge, Margaret recognized this could indicate an allergic reaction. "Has she tried any new foods?" "No, nothing unusual. Just, since she started sleeping with that teddy bear, Zoe has mentioned several times that it smells strange." Even after the conversation ended, Margaret couldn't shake her feeling of discomfort. Could there be a connection between the teddy bear and Zoe's illness? If so, maybe there was a reason Amy had been frightened of it. That evening, as Margaret was cleaning up after dinner, the phone rang. The displayed number was her mother's. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello? Margaret, what have you done?" Ruth's voice was completely different from her usual coldness, obviously upset. "What do you mean?" "I heard from Vanessa." "Why did you give my present to Vanessa's child?" Margaret was at a loss for words. Someone must have told Ruth. "Because Amy was afraid of it." "Get it back. Right now." Ruth's voice was urgent. "Why are you so excited? It's just a teddy bear, isn't it?" On the other end of the phone, Ruth took a deep breath. "I'm coming to get it back tomorrow." Then the call suddenly ended. Margaret stared at her smartphone with eyes full of anxiety and doubt. Soon, the phone rang again. This time it was from Vanessa. "Maggie," Vanessa's voice was trembling. "Zoe's fever has risen. And Mom suddenly called. She was asking why my daughter has that doll." Margaret froze. She had an ominous feeling about the way Ruth had phrased it. Margaret spent the whole night feeling uneasy. While preparing breakfast, she observed Amy. Her daughter was full of energy, and the allergy symptoms from a few days ago had completely disappeared. "Mom, I have a math test at school today," Amy said, stirring her cereal. "Is Zoe still sick?" Margaret hesitated for a moment. "Yes, but don't worry. She'll get better soon. I wasn't feeling well before, but now I'm super energetic," Amy said brightly. "Since that teddy bear is gone, my runny nose has stopped too." Margaret caught her breath. "Amy, what do you mean?" "When that teddy bear was near me, I felt kind of suffocated. But I'm fine now," Amy said casually. Margaret felt a chill run down her spine at her daughter's words. Just as she was about to say something, her smartphone rang. The screen displayed, "Mother." "Hello? Margaret." Ruth's voice was even more agitated than the previous night. "Why does my sister's child have that doll?" "Mom, calm down. Amy was afraid of it, and Zoe liked it, so. You don't understand anything. Get it back right now." Ruth's voice had an urgency Margaret had never heard before. "What's the problem?" "It's just a teddy bear, isn't it?" "It's not just a problem, it's dangerous," Ruth shouted. "Go to Vanessa's house right now. I'll be there soon too." Before the call ended, Margaret heard her mother's trembling breath. She sprang into action immediately. David had already left for work, and after taking Amy to school, she headed to Vanessa's house. Vanessa's house was a small single-family home in the suburbs. When she knocked on the door, Vanessa greeted her with a tired expression. "Maggie, thank you for coming." Vanessa's eyes were red and swollen. "Zoe's fever won't go down. I called the doctor this morning, but..." Margaret entered the house and immediately went to check on her niece. Zoe was lying in bed, her face flushed, with visible rashes spread across her arms and neck. And the teddy bear in question was placed next to her. "Zoe, how are you feeling?" Margaret asked gently. "Auntie." Zoe's voice was weak. "My throat hurts, and I'm itchy." Drawing on her nursing experience, Margaret closely observed Zoe's symptoms. The pattern of the rash, the high fever, the sore throat, these were all typical symptoms of an allergic reaction. She cautiously approached the teddy bear. "Does this teddy bear have a smell?" Zoe nodded weakly. "It smells strange. I didn't notice at first." Margaret picked up the teddy bear and examined it carefully. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary teddy bear, but upon closer inspection, part of the seam was slightly open. She gently opened that section and peered inside. There, hidden among the normal cotton stuffing, was a small cloth bag. "Vanessa, could you bring me some scissors?" Seeing her sister's serious expression, Vanessa silently complied. Margaret used the scissors to carefully remove the small cloth bag. When she opened the bag, white powder came out. "This is..." Margaret gasped. "What is it?" Vanessa asked in a voice filled with fear. "I'm not certain, but I think this is a substance that causes allergic reactions. From my nursing experience, it looks like a mixture of certain herbs. It could cause severe allergic reactions in some people." Vanessa was dumbfounded. But why would Mom? At that moment, there was a loud knock at the door. When the two went to the entrance, Ruth was standing there. Her face was contorted with anger. Where is that doll?" Ruth shouted as soon as she entered the house. "Mom, calm down," Margaret said. "We've just found a strange powder inside the teddy bear." The color drained from Ruth's face. "What have you done?" "Zoe is suffering from a rash and fever," Vanessa said with a trembling voice. "Did you do this?" The tension in the room rose to an unbearable level. Ruth seemed momentarily speechless, but quickly regained her composure. "I was just..." "What? What were you planning?" Margaret raised her voice. Amy also had allergy symptoms when the teddy bear was near her. And as soon as Zoe took it home, Amy recovered, and Zoe became sick instead. This can't be a coincidence. "I was just..." Ruth stumbled over her words again. Then suddenly, her expression changed. It became cold and calculated. "You have always failed to meet my expectations, Margaret." "What are you talking about?" "What I wanted was a strong, smart, beautiful daughter. But you..." Ruth said contemptuously. "You were always mediocre, with no ambition. Vanessa was different. She became the daughter I wanted." Vanessa's eyes widened. "Mom, what are you saying?" "You two are beginning to disappoint me, Vanessa," Ruth said coldly. "I was disappointed by your divorce. But at least Zoe is becoming the kind of child I envisioned. Amy is..." She frowned. "Amy is just a boring child. Just like Margaret." "So that teddy bear..." Margaret said, trembling with fear and anger. "It was specially formulated," Ruth now said proudly. "It was supposed to give Amy chronic health problems and wear you down mentally. But you giving it to Vanessa's child, you ruined my plan." The room fell deathly silent. Vanessa covered her face with her hands and began to cry, her shoulders shaking. "Why?" Margaret asked in a trembling voice. "Why would you do such a thing?" "You were a failure to me," Ruth said in an emotionless voice. "I only wanted to love strong children. Those who show weakness are not worth loving." Ruth suddenly moved toward Zoe's room. Margaret and Vanessa hurriedly followed her. Ruth grabbed the teddy bear and coldly said, "Nothing will happen to Zoe. I only meant to cause a little suffering." "Mom." Margaret exploded with anger. You harmed your own granddaughter. Your actions are criminal. Ruth looked at Margaret with icy eyes. I have the right to shape my family as I see fit. You, Vanessa, the grandchildren, you're all my creations. Vanessa finally stood up and stared at her mother with a face full of fear and anger. All this time, I've pretended not to notice how coldly you treated my sister. You've been using me to hurt her. Ruth shrugged. You were the daughter who replaced her, Vanessa. But now, you're betraying me too. Betrayal? Vanessa's voice trembled. You're the one who betrayed us, Mom. You harmed my daughter. Margaret stood by her niece and placed her hand on Zoe's forehead. Zoe's fever had risen further. Vanessa, we need to take Zoe to the hospital. We'll have this powder examined too. Ruth's expression suddenly changed to panic. Hospital? No, that's not necessary. The mixture I created won't cause permanent harm. Here, I'll return the teddy bear. It's too late, Margaret said coldly. So you've finally revealed your true self. After years of abuse and discriminatory treatment, it's finally come to this. Ruth suddenly clutched the teddy bear tightly. For the first time, an expression of fear appeared on her face. You can't prove anything, she said in a trembling voice. This is just a teddy bear. It's all in your imagination. Margaret straightened her posture and stared at her mother with the calmness she had developed from handling countless emergencies as a nurse. We've already seen what's inside, Mom. And we're going to have this powder analyzed. I just... Ruth stuttered. Vanessa rose from Zoe's bedside and, with her face wet with tears but filled with determination, confronted her mother. I'm taking Zoe to the hospital. And I'm reporting this to the police. The police? Ruth's voice cracked. Are you joking? Taking family matters outside? This isn't a family matter, Margaret said calmly. You deliberately tried to harm a child. This is a crime. Ruth's attitude suddenly changed. She abruptly straightened her back and regained her haughty expression. I've done nothing wrong. I was just trying to create strong children. A little hardship makes children stronger. Makes them stronger. Margaret said incredulously. You tried to give my daughter chronic health problems. Weak children have no value, Ruth coldly declared. My mother did the same to me. That's what made me who I am today. A strong, successful woman. The room fell silent for a moment. Margaret and Vanessa exchanged glances. There was a shared understanding from years of experience. The root of their mother's problematic behavior had finally been revealed. You've been manipulating us like this all along, Margaret said quietly. Calling me a failure and praising Vanessa, making us compete. And now you're trying to do the same to our daughters. You were a victim too, Vanessa looked at her mother with compassion. But that doesn't justify your actions. Ruth clutched the teddy bear and backed away. No one understands me. Even Harry has grown cold lately. He's weak too. Dad isn't weak, Margaret said strongly. He's just kind. You're confusing kindness with weakness. Kindness doesn't help survival, Ruth said mockingly. This world is harsh. I just wanted my children and grandchildren to be able to survive. Your methods are wrong, Vanessa said in a trembling voice. We don't want to live like you. At that moment, Zoe moaned. Her rash was spreading, and her breathing was becoming labored. Margaret immediately rushed to her niece's side. Signs of anaphylaxis, Margaret recognized the emergency and sprang into action. Call an ambulance. Ruth appeared to be in a panic. Clutching the teddy bear, she began, it shouldn't be serious. My prescription. Shut up. Margaret shouted, trembling with anger. Your prescription is nearly killing a child. Vanessa called 911, and Margaret began first aid using her nursing knowledge. "Ruth, put down that teddy bear," Margaret commanded. "It's making Zoe's symptoms worse." But Ruth suddenly ran toward the door. "You can't understand." Vanessa tried to chase after her mother, but Margaret stopped her. "Zoe is what matters now. The police will find her." For the few minutes until the ambulance arrived, Margaret continued to closely monitor Zoe's condition. When the paramedics entered the house, Margaret explained Zoe's condition to them in professional terms and handed over a sample of the powder from the teddy bear. "This might be the causative agent. Please analyze it." While the ambulance was taking Zoe to the hospital, Margaret sat beside Vanessa and put an arm around her shoulder. "It's going to be okay, Vanessa. Zoe will recover." Vanessa stumbled over her words, and eventually said with a trembling voice, "I was on Mom's side for so long. I was cold to you. I bragged. But Mom was just using me all along." "You're a victim too, Vanessa," Margaret said gently. "Both of us are. But let's end it now." Margaret stood up and made a phone call. "Police. I want to report a case of deliberate injury using harmful substances." Vanessa also stood up and stood next to her sister. "I'll testify too." They took each other's hands. It was the first moment of true solidarity between the sisters who had been separated and made to compete by their mother since childhood. "I need to pick up Amy from school," Margaret said, suddenly noticing the time. "Let's go together," Vanessa suggested. "And then we'll go to the hospital together. As a family." Margaret smiled. "Yes, as a real family." As they were about to leave the house, a police car arrived. Margaret explained the situation to the officers and provided a photo of Ruth. "Is she dangerous?" an officer asked. Margaret thought for a moment and answered, "Yes. She believes her actions are right. That's the most dangerous thing." A year later, in a suburban Philadelphia park, children's laughter filled the air. Amy and Zoe were flying colorful kites high in the sky, chasing after them. "Look, Amy. It's going even higher." Zoe cheered. Her cheeks were tinged pink, and there was no trace of her previous illness. Margaret and Vanessa sat on a bench, watching the children with warm gazes. "I can't believe it's been a year since then," Vanessa said, picking up her coffee cup. "Yes," Margaret agreed. "But we've overcome it." Ruth's trial had ended 3 months earlier. She was charged with harming her granddaughter, but after a psychological evaluation, she was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. The court ultimately sentenced her to probation with mandatory treatment. Meanwhile, Harry had claimed he knew nothing of his wife's actions and had filed for divorce. "Dad called again," Margaret said quietly. "He seems to have settled into his apartment. Last week, he went fishing with the kids for the first time. He'll make a good grandfather," Vanessa smiled. "Free from Mom's influence, he's finding himself again." "Yes," Margaret nodded. "He was a victim too." The sisters drank their coffee in silence, watching the children run around. Margaret and Vanessa were receiving counseling to heal the wounds from growing up under their mother's pathological love. It was sometimes a painful process, but the two were beginning to build a true sisterly relationship for the first time. "Yesterday in our session, the counselor said something interesting," Margaret said, looking up at the sky. "The competition and jealousy we experienced as children were all intentionally created by Mom. We were meant to support each other." "I understand," Vanessa took her sister's hand. "I always wanted to be like you. Strong, kind, smart. But in trying to meet Mom's expectations, I convinced myself you were my enemy." Margaret looked at her sister and smiled. "I was jealous of your confidence and talent too. But now I think all of that is our strength." "Look at Amy and Zoe," Vanessa said. "They won't be like us. They're growing up like true sisters." At that moment, Amy and Zoe came running hand in hand toward them. "Mom, Auntie, did you pack a picnic for us?" Amy asked with expectant eyes. "Of course," Margaret said, opening the basket. "Come, let's eat together." The four sat on a blanket, sharing the meal. It was a peaceful time filled with laughter and conversation. Miles away, Ruth gazed out the window of her treatment facility. On the desk in her room was a family photograph, but she had turned her back to it. Despite the psychiatrist's earnest efforts, she never truly repented for her actions. "No one understands me," she muttered to herself, staring blankly out the window. "I was only trying to make them strong." But her voice echoed emptily in the room. It was she herself who had severed the bonds of a true family, and now she would spend her remaining years in solitude. In the park, Margaret and Vanessa were launching a new kite into the sky with the children. Watching the kite soar on the wind, Margaret thought to herself, more important than blood ties is the feeling of caring for one another. That's the true meaning of family.